Hello, Dogg from Air Fans. Evan Benton here, back on the social commentary uh, train of thought with this video, which is something I haven't been talking about because I've been talking about uh, the pandemic issue. So this video is going to make a lot of people very angry, I'm sure, if they bother to watch it. But I guess that's the point. That's what we're here for. Talk about real issues. All right. So what I'm going to talk about in this video is the lower ninth ward, living in the lower ninth ward, and what that has been like for my wife and I these past 4 years. I'm sure it'll be interesting to a lot of people who care about the world and who want to understand it and make the world a better place. And if that doesn't apply to you, please stop watching. Thank you very much. So, all right, to the rest of you, we've been here 4 years, and in that time we have seen zero private home building. All the homes that we have seen go up have been low-income housing or nonprofits. And so one of the nonprofits that's the one I dislike the most is something called a community land trust, which I didn't even know existed until I moved here and saw it firsthand. But what a community land trust apparently is it's a situation where the nonprofit maintains ownership of the land and they sell the building. So if you buy the building, the house, for example, you can't, I don't know how that works. I don't know how to explain it. That's how it works. That's what it is. I guess you can still sell the building, but you can't sell the land. So I don't understand what you own in that case. So you're basically like in a long-term lease. And that just seems predatory. That seems like a predatory lending scheme to be doing to people who don't have the means to afford a house through the normal free market. So that's horrible, but that's something that we have here. And then the most high-profile nonprofit that's been built here the thing is what are called here Brad Pitt houses. So after Katrina, remember the lower ninth ward was completely obliterated by Katrina. If you didn't know that, which I'm sure you did, but so Brad Pitt, in his generosity, came in with all this money, and his famous architect friends, and designed all these goofy looking houses for the people who used to live here. And I guess he sold them to these people for reasonable, less than market rates. And these houses are just bizarre looking. They're just, the angles go everywhere. And what's happened is they are falling apart because, like, one of the things is they build flat roofs, and it rains a ton here in New Orleans, and the rain just sits on the roof and destroys the buildings. And this is biochar on my arm. More on that in another video. And I don't know if it's just because the buildings were poorly designed or what, but they're falling apart and everything now. They're getting demolished. And so as my wife has noted with that, one of the things that's really screwy about the Brad Pitt houses is that, imagine you just lost your neighborhood from a hurricane and flooding, and you're moving back, and they give you this crazy looking house, okay? So you've had this traumatic experience, and now you go into this crazy Dr. Seuss house, and it's just a further traumatic event. It's very, very crazy. And my camera's going blue today. I'm sorry. I think it's because I usually film at night. I'm just going to go with it because I don't know how to fix it. The one, just as a contrast, the one singular private construction that I've seen was right behind us. A person started building a house, and they stopped halfway through. I don't know why. So there's an unfinished, tiny little house on a huge lot right behind me, and it's extremely small and it has hardly any windows. It has no eaves, and the eave, if you don't know, is the part of the roof that overhangs the wall. So the water comes down and doesn't trickle right down the roof or down the wall and destroy the wall, which is, of course, what's going to happen. Like in the case of these nonprofits, or sorry, not the nonprofits, the low-income housing houses that I've also seen go up. It was really strange because they have these crazy built-up foundations, and then the structure itself is made of steel. If you've seen those like steel houses instead of wood. But then there's a lot of them where they just have no eaves either, or like an entire side of the house is missing the eaves, right? So, the thing about sorry, I said it again. The thing about the low-income housing is they're not designed to survive. They're meant to exist for about 30 years and then be replaced. So an example of that, I think it's on Earhart here in New Orleans. One of the first things I saw when we were here on vacation, there is an entire housing complex, like a block of nothing but stoops. Nothing is left of this housing complex but stoops, and I assume it was from Katrina. But right across the street is a brand new housing complex, low-income housing. So instead of replacing the one, they just demolished it, and now it's just behind a chain link fence. And then right across the street, they built another low-income housing project. So that's what happens with that. Weaponized poverty, if you're not familiar with that concept. I'm not going to talk about that in this video too much, but that's the general concept, the gist of what we're getting at. Instead, I'm going to look at just more specific examples from just living here, okay? Lived experience, as my friends, the leftists, say. So since we've lived here in 4 years, the dollar store has closed. The CVS pharmacy has closed, leaving us with zero places to really buy food. There's a few like little convenience stores. There is a great place for po' boys. Really is, Cajun Joe's. I love it. Very nice people too. There's a couple gas stations, but there's nothing here. I gotta say, there's hardly. It's a hard place to live. Okay, and it's shocking that Katrina was 16 years ago now, or 15 and a half years ago now. It's hard to explain why it is the way it is. Okay, it's hard to explain it to people who are coming here and seeing it for the first time. Because it looks like it happened yesterday. In my personal experience as a homeowner, doing things, digging in the garden, putting in our garden, digging holes for plants, I can't dig a hole without filling a bucket full of rubble, broken glass, broken bits of tile, broken concrete, twisted bits of metal. Every single time I put a shovel in the ground, that is what I find. We bought the lot next door to us, and we've been working on improving that, putting in a garden there and putting a fence around it. And the house that was there was demolished by the city. And as an aside, I gotta say, all of the criticisms that I'm applying to the lower Ninth Ward here, I believe the main culprit is the city of New Orleans and the city council of New Orleans. These are the people that we should be holding accountable for this thing. Whatever else I have to say, whatever else you should take away from it, I'm not blaming the local people who live here, okay? I'm not blaming anyone who's involved in a local thing here. It's the city government, 100%, okay? Not 100%, but majority for sure. Majority of the blame for why the lower Ninth Ward is the way it is lies with the city of New Orleans. Truth. So anyway, the city of New Orleans demolished the house on this side of us that we bought the lot from, and the entire lot is covered with the remains of that building. So they did a very poor job of cleaning it up. There's just entire panes of glass, like entire window panes, of course, broken into millions of pieces, but just laying on the ground. There is probably the entire footprint of the house on that lot is covered in shingles that are still there, and I'm still picking them up every time I go outside. I'm picking up shingles, and some of them have grass growing on them, but if you pick up a piece, it's like it's like a 2 by 2 foot square comes up every single time you find a corner, and this whole thing comes up. So that just so much work. It's just so much work. I just want to, that's what the point I want to make with all this. It is so much work to live here and do what we're doing. And I'm not complaining, okay? I knew it would be, I didn't know it would be this bad, but I knew it would be hard. I was prepared for it, and I'm here, and to a large extent, I am enjoying it, okay? I'm not trying to brag and say, look at me, give me social credit for doing these things. I'm just trying to give an honest appraisal of what it's been like to live in the Lower Ninth Ward over these 4 years, all right? So there is a drug front operating out of the convenience store across from our house. And what that means for you, if you've never been in a building, in a convenience store that is a fake convenience store that doesn't actually sell food or things, it only sells drugs. Like, let me lay it out for you, okay? You go in, there are shelves in this building. These shelves do not have goods on them, okay? The few goods there are is like there's hot sauce, right? But it's not one kind of hot sauce. It's like 3 or 5 different types of hot sauce, but like one of each type grouped together on the shelf. And I mean, it's like it's like people took their their food bank donation down to this building and traded it for drugs. That's honestly what I think is happening there. All right. So my question is, how does this place exist? Why does this drug front exist? How has it not been shut down? I know drugs are very popular, but it's not free market forces, if you know what I mean. And it should go without saying, but every day it should go without saying that this is a bad point, but every day there are gunshots here in the Lower Ninth Ward. Lots of gunshots. There are carjackings. People die. People get shot here. It is a dangerous place to live. I see people doing drugs in the vacant lot right across the street from my house. I see people passed out on the street right in front of my house. And I mean, I don't know. Why did we move here then is the obvious question, okay? And the simple answer is that we want to make a difference in this community. And if that sounds trite, it is. If that sounds naive, it certainly is. But hear me out here, okay? I have spent a lot of time playing SimCity, all right? I have spent tons of time studying like civil engineering kinds of stuff, like how cities are put together. I'm really interested in trains in particular, mass transit. I'm really interested in the way that cities are built, and I thought would be a great opportunity to take my unique knowledge set and apply it to a real world problem, if you will. And so we're right on the edge of New Orleans. We're right at that junction between the city and the rural environment. I think that's a fascinating place, and with our business that we're trying to build, I think it's a perfect opportunity to create jobs and things like that. I think it's great. I don't hold it against, like, I mean, perhaps there's a place for low income housing, okay, but there's also a place for jobs, okay. People need to work, and that's all I'm saying. And there's a massive imbalance of that in the Lower Ninth Ward, where there's this many homes being built and this many places for people to work, okay. And it's that chicken or the egg kind of deal is where we're at, okay, which is a huge problem. I mean, it is hard. This is a a singular event really in history. I mean, there have been disasters and there have been rebuildings over time, but each one is unique, and there are unique struggles for the people involved in that to face. So here's a really controversial thing I'm going to say. I think people, first of all, saying that this is hard work, what we're doing, I think people should be rewarded for hard work. Okay, hear me out, because I know that's a wrong thing, but I think that if you put work into something, it becomes more valuable. All right. So, like for example, if you buy an old car that isn't running and you fix it and it becomes a car that works, I think that car that works is more valuable than the car that was broken, and I think that person should be rewarded for their time. And so I fully expect someday that this house will be worth more than we paid for it. In fact, it is right now, but that's another story. But that lot next door to us should be worth more in the future, right? Regardless of any kind of like social considerations. I don't want to sell this house. I want to live here. That's the thing. I don't want to sell this to someone who's going to turn it into like a condo, because I know that's what's going to happen, because I've lived in New Orleans for 4 years and I've seen that that's happening all over the city. Okay. What I want, as silly as it sounds, is I want to live here. I want to start a family. I want to do the urban farm thing. All right. That's my intention. That's what I want to do. That's what I desire. But having lived here for this long, I am not sure that that's going to work. Okay. So I got to say also, we're doing a lot of things here in the neighborhood. Just because we live here, my wife is going out and picking up tires and garbage every day, and she's calling. You have to call the trash company to get them picked up, and it's a long story. They don't come and pick them up. You have to call again. It's a hard thing for her to do. It's a hard thing for people of means to do. It's a hard thing for anybody to do, regardless of if you're rich or poor. It's ridiculous. Again, it's working with the city leadership, and the utility companies here are corrupt beyond imagination. And that is the problem, again, with the Lower Ninth Ward. So, and I'm not saying this to impress people. Like, I know that you're not going to believe that. A certain population of the people who I hope have just turned off by now. I don't think that I'm doing this. I don't think that there's like people who can do this stuff that we're doing and people who can't. Okay, I think that the point is that there's people who have the inclination and the means to do this work, and there's people who don't. All right, it's really about the inclination. And I mean, honestly, what it is about to me is it's about being a Christian. That is what I think I am doing here. I'm not trying to clean up the Lower Ninth Ward because I'm a Christian. I'm trying to clean up the Lower Ninth Ward because of Jesus Christ and the example that he set, okay, by sacrificing himself to teach us love, basically. And furthermore, I just don't want to look at garbage. And I know that when there's garbage, garbage begets garbage, okay? And so like a lot across the street, if we don't keep the grass reasonably short, people do drugs in it, okay? So that's just something you learn living in a destroyed neighborhood, is that if you don't maintain the vacant lots around you, nobody does, and ne'er-do-wells go in there and take advantage of that lack of supervision and do things you wouldn't want them to do. So I want to say flat out that I have made a terrible mistake, not in purchasing this house or the lot next door, but here it is. When we first bought this house, almost every single lot around us was a vacant lot, and we could have bought them. But because I was naive and it was my first house that I bought, I didn't know that I could have bought them all and rolled them into the same mortgage, okay? And because of that, because of my error, one by one, they've been bought up by almost every single one is a low-income housing unit, and that is what's there. And again, I don't blame the low-income housing. It's a bank, right? It's a bank. That's who owns these buildings. I certainly don't blame the residents. All right, I blame myself, and that's just what I'm saying. Like, this is the thought that keeps me up at night is not how terrible low-income housing projects are, or how terrible nonprofits are. It's that I failed to buy these, to be a good steward of the land. All right, and that's if we move, it won't be because of the low-income housing. It'll be because of my failure to buy these lots and to secure a good piece of land for my family for the future. So again, there's people who are just going to dismiss that because they're going to say, like, that's Christianity is a fairy tale, but I don't care. Go away. So in conclusion to all of that, I just want to reiterate that living in the lower Ninth Ward is hard. Like, rehabilitating a neighborhood that has been destroyed by a natural disaster is freaking hard. There are so many problems that you just wouldn't imagine until you start digging, literally, okay? And this is the thing about things that are hard. If something is hard, that means you will probably fail. Those two utterances are equal in meaning, okay? And with our, participation award culture, we don't understand that anymore. We think that if you're doing a hard thing, that means you're just a hero. You're just getting it done. And if you fail, it's not your own fault. You were oppressed. The system was just against you. It was rigged. Everyone just thinks it's a rigged game. Oh, it's not my fault. And this is the thing. If you want to do something, if you get an idea in your head and no one is doing it, that thing, it's not because you're the first person to think of doing that thing. It's probably that everyone else who wanted to do that thing, tried it and failed. This is the reality of the situation, okay? So, I mean, I'm not saying don't move here, I'm just saying this is what you're up against. This is part of what you're up against, okay? Just the reality of the situation is it's very, very difficult to do anything here, all right? Yes, the properties are relatively inexpensive, but again, there's a reason for that, okay? There's a reason that these houses are so cheap, and there's a reason that it's hard to sell them. So, the reason that I'm making this video, the immediate reason is that a local nonprofit, which is involved in building houses for people and selling them at below market value to people who could not apparently otherwise afford them, was recently robbed of $12,000 worth of donated sorry? 21,000. I've received a correction. $21,000 worth of donated building supplies from one of their shipping containers in the Lower Ninth Ward. And so I commented on their post on Facebook saying, are you sure you should be building houses for people to move here? And I was called a racist. I was called a racist for asking this question. Are you sure people should move here? All right. And now I got to clarify, the nonprofit themselves did not call me a racist. It was other followers who called me a racist. I got to make that clear. But, and what they did in okay, first of all, in my responding to things, the first thing I said was, here's what's going to happen. I laid it out, right? I said, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to argue using facts. You're going to argue using feelings. And if you disagree with someone, you're going to call them a racist. And that's what they did, okay? Exactly. And I even quoted that. I said, this is what I said above when someone called me a racist. I said, here it is. And they said, yeah, well, you're a racist. Okay? One person said I was a racist because I used the word there to refer to the lower ninth ward instead of here. Another person said, what do you mean by the word people? As in, by me saying people, I'm meaning a certain group of people that's called othering in the social justice warrior world, right? That's what they're accusing me of. I'm othering people by saying, I'm diminishing their humanity by saying there versus here, and by using the word people. I'm saying, by me saying the word people, I'm saying they're not people. That's what they're saying, okay? And these are adults. These are adults that are having this conversation with me, all right? They are, for the record, all white people. I'm assuming they're all out of town. I mean, I confirmed almost all of them were out of town by looking at their profiles that weren't hidden. So that's really interesting because several of them also criticized me by saying that I was a newcomer. That's what they said, okay? And what's really ironic here is, isn't that right out of the conservative playbook, right? You're not from around here, son. And that's what these people did to me. That is literally what they told me, is that I haven't been here long enough to have an opinion, okay? One person told me that because of what I said, she had just made a $50 donation to this nonprofit in my name. And I could expect a thank you card from them. This is what she said. And the interesting thing here, if she is doing that, my realization is other people are doing that. People are making spite donations to nonprofits, right? And I would never have made that connection unless I had had this Facebook exchange, okay? So, and what's really interesting there is I'm realizing that, okay? I'm seeing that when something happens in the world, other things like that probably happen in the world. So like if I see an apple, it's probably not the only apple in the world. That's called generalizing, right? And that's something that, like, these people, mind you, and by these people I mean white women, white liberals, they cannot generalize from a point of data because that would be stereotyping, okay? It would be a stereotype if you see one apple and you think that it will taste like other apples, okay? So you have to go through life doubting yourself, right? Oh, that looks like an apple, but could it be full of worms? I don't know. And it just paralyzes you and it makes you unable to think clearly. And this is what I'm dealing with, okay? So I want to just respond to these people. I did say this, okay, but I want to respond to all the Dogg for Mayor fans. This is what I think about this nonprofit issue, and they're having theft, which is unfortunate. And I think it's bad that they got their stuff stolen, and I feel bad for them. Okay. What I think is that it's not a good idea to put people in harm's way. Okay. I don't think it's a good idea to put a person in a place where they might get shot or where they might get $21,000 worth of their goods stolen from them. I think that's crazy, and I don't think it's compassionate, okay? And I don't think it matters if you're white or black or rich or poor, okay? The richer you are, the better you're going to be able to cope with something like that. But it's a bad situation, and it's ridiculous and crazy to put someone in that situation. And you just got to understand that, okay? And how you put race into that is a bonkers conclusion, okay? And so, I mean, you have the people who need, if a person can't afford a house, which I'm not saying they're a bad person, I'm not saying they shouldn't own a house, okay? But if a person can't afford a house, they can't afford a lot of things. They need a lot of things. And the lower ninth ward is not able to provide those things, okay? Because it's not just a house, it's a job and food. And you can't buy food in the lower ninth ward. Not the food that people should be eating, okay? Not like fruits and vegetables. You can't work in the lower ninth ward, especially, well, you can't work in the lower ninth ward. There's no, and people are, ugh. So I'm a massage therapist, if you don't know from watching my channel. And the thing of that is people talk to me. It's like being a barber where you just have conversations, but instead of like having a 20-minute conversation, it's like an hour conversation or an hour and a half conversation. So I've spent 12 years having like decently long conversations with strangers, okay? And when I tell my clients, when they say, well, where do you live? Or in the local parlance, where do you stay at? Okay. They don't say that, but that's, I tell them I live in the lower ninth ward, and they say, oh. And I know, and I'm not doing it right, okay? But they're like, that's what they say. Oh, I haven't been there in years. Good for you. That's my experience. And when they say that, I know that I am doing something that is strange. I know that I get feedback is what I'm trying to say. I get feedback from normal people that what I am doing, my life choices are outside of the norm, okay? And so therefore, I mean, that gives me some sort of idea that makes me question my choices. Is it right to live here? Is it safe to live here? Is it a good idea to live here? Is it a good idea to bring up children here and expect them to prosper? And I want to save the part about race for later, but for the record, just here, I believe that my thoughts on that are the same as Black people's thoughts, okay? Or any race, or even any class or gender, okay? Or sexual orientation, let's say, or religion, or ability, right? I think that people just want what's best for themselves and their families, and that's, like, for example, we bought this house that you're seeing right now. We bought this house from a Black family. It was the second generation of owners, okay? So we bought it from the children or nieces, I'm sorry, I don't know, of the man who had this house built in the 60s, and they moved to a better neighborhood. Riddle me that, right? So this is the problem then, succinctly stated, with the actions of this nonprofit, all right? It is not that I disapprove of their building houses here, right, in a questionable neighborhood. The problem is that this nonprofit, judging by their response to me, has no way of evaluating whether or not their actions are having the desired result. So in other words, what they're telling me and I'm not going to go into just proving this extensively because I don't want to get into the whole conversation of it. But what they prove to me with their response is that they said they want to build a community. They want to like bring the community back or something like that. But they don't know what that means, and they don't know whether or not their actions are having that effect, because I'm telling them, look, here's reality for you. You just got a bunch of stuff stolen, right? And just imagine the people that you sell a house to, imagine that happens to them. How's that going to make you feel, right? Is that going to be good? Are they going to keep staying? Are they going to keep living there? And to my statement, they did not respond with facts, okay? They did not say like, yeah, that's a good point, but here's what we're doing. We acknowledge your criticism. However, this is why we think we're doing the right thing. They said, well, I'm not going to get into what they're saying. I mean, I don't want to like really belabor that point. It's just, if you want something to happen, you got to know what that thing is, and then you got to check, right? Just basic. That is what we're dealing with this particular nonprofit, and just the nonprofits, which is the reason I mentioned that nonprofit and low-income housing and all that, is that simply that these are the people who are building the houses here in the lower ninth ward. This is what is driving the development, okay? So if you're planning on moving here, thinking about it, considering it, I'm not singling out these people unfairly. I'm singling out these people because they're the ones who are here. They are the people who are doing the thing, as we say, all right? So why is the lower ninth ward still a war zone 16 years after Katrina? I mentioned it's the fault of the city leadership. Okay, this is true. What I've realized is that the lower ninth ward is more valuable to the leadership of the city of New Orleans dead than alive. Okay, this means the lower ninth ward is more valuable to them as a martyr than as a living, breathing, historically African-American community. You understand what I'm saying? It's more valuable that they can point to the lower ninth ward and say, look at all these problems. We need more funding. We need more departments. We need more taxes, than it is to actually go and fix the problem. Because if they fix the problem, they wouldn't be able to do all those things. They'd have to downsize the government. They'd have to fire employees. They might not get reelected, okay? And the larger connection is that this is true of every minority group and every issue in the world, as far as we are concerned with electing politicians, right? And to this, I refer you to my video on Sergei Nechayeva's Catechism of a Revolutionist, where he talks about the cause and how the cause is always subsidiary to the ultimate cause of revolution, okay? And this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a divide and conquer scheme where, here it's the lower ninth ward, but there it's environmentalism. Over here it's gun control, right? It doesn't matter, okay? Or like gay marriage, right? They don't want the thing. They want control. They want power. They're just using the thing because you care about it, okay? It matters to you. It works to convince you to give them your power, your freedom, your responsibility. It's like chess, okay? If an opponent takes your pawn in the game of chess, the goal, he's not taking the pawn because he doesn't like the pawn, the piece itself. He's taking the pawn to put your king in check. That is how you win the game of chess, okay? You do not win the game of world domination by keeping the lower ninth ward a slum, okay? You win the game of world domination by calling anyone who criticizes these actions a racist and silencing them. This is how that game is played. The goal of, in this case, the leadership of New Orleans, the goal is not the few. The goal is the many, okay? So when you look at black people and see a certain thing happening there, when you look at gays and you say gays are being targeted, the goal is not to target the minority. The goal is to use the minority as leverage to go out and take over the majority, okay? The goal is not to take the pawn. The goal is to take the entire chessboard. And that is what is going on here. That is the big picture. And Americans in particular, I believe, because of our terrible education system, are hopelessly naive. Hopelessly naive. I am picking my words very carefully when I say that. And this is the way it works, okay? Intelligence agencies create nonprofits. Do you know that? Because if you want to work, if I want to buy land in most countries aren't set up to fail. Like, I think in America, a Chinese person can come in and buy land here. I don't know if that's true, but I think it is true. Any country that's not deliberately set up, designed to fail, like ours is, you have to be a citizen of that country to buy land. You have to be a citizen of that country to incorporate a corporation. So what they do is they get a local person, and that's called an asset as opposed to an agent. They get them on the payroll, and they just say, hey, can we just use your name? Can we put this in your name? And that's how they do it, first of all, okay? And that's the basis of a false flag, which is how the game is played, okay? Intelligence agents do not wear uniforms, and when they do, they wear the other guy's uniform. That's how it works. That's what a false flag is, okay? And the fact that I have to explain this is proof that we are pretty far gone as a country, okay? The fact that that I'm going to get criticized simply for stating that. And look, this is how crazy leftists are. Is you can find one that's took a certain college course, right? And you can say, hey, you know what the CIA did in Nicaragua in whatever, the 60s or whatever? I mean, it was a long time in Nicaragua, but still going on. But they'll say, oh yeah, that's so terrible. It's just typical of imperialism and whiteness and colonialism, and that's what's going on there. Is imperialism. And then you say, well, did you know what the CIA was doing in Los Angeles in the 1980s? And it's like, what? No. I never heard about that. I never heard about Freeway Ricky Ross or, CIA bringing in coke, crack cocaine, and heroin and giving that to black people to destroy their community, right? So that is called a limited hangout when you hear about this thing and you direct all your attention to this thing way over in Nicaragua, and then you don't realize that the same thing is happening by the same people in your backyard. So, but the way that works more particularly, okay, is it's never about the majority versus the minority, okay? It's never the one group coming in and just oppressing the other group or taking it over. Like, for example, I, Dogg, go to Nicaragua and I say, hello, fellow Nicaraguans. I'd like to sell you a banana, right? You get a Nicaraguan, probably a well-connected Nicaraguan, whatever, and you say, hey, dude, Salvador, if you go along with this, we will make it worth your while, okay? You figure out what he is willing to work for, and you give it to him, right? So if it's like a coup, you say, hey, Salvador, if you participate, if you help us overthrow the current presidente, we will make you the next Presidente. Does that make sense? So it's never us versus them. It's never that cut and dry. It's always, in the world of espionage, in the world of intelligence, it is always infiltrators go in and they turn a select few individuals, and then the select few individuals, the members, the in-group members, work on the rest of the group. Okay, and there's bajillions of examples of this if you take the time to study the history of our planet. So an example I have here, because it's topical, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. We're all thinking about this because of the current health situation, all right? An experiment on black men. They were not treated with syphilis. They were told, or they were not treated for syphilis. They were told that they were being treated, but they weren't. And the whole goal of this experiment was just to observe the course of the untreated disease in the adult male over like 40 years. And it's awful. It's an awful, awful thing. Not only that, but like 10 years into the disease, 10 years into the experiment, they developed penicillin, which could have been used to cure them, right? So it's like useless data, basically, that they just murdered these men for, okay? But here's the thing. Tuskegee Institute, founded by Booker T. Washington, a hero of the African American community, and I still think he's better than W.E.B. Du Bois for sure. If you know about the debate that they had, because he was actually in favor of black people not being dependent on the government, right, doing their own thing, which I think black people should be. I think black people should have neighborhoods. I think black people should have communities, and there should be more black-owned businesses for sure. But that's another story. So he died in 1915. He was the experiment began in 1932. So he was obviously not involved, but the second president of the Tuskegee Institute, a man named Robert Moton, definitely signed off on this project. Okay, and so 1932 was the Tuskegee syphilis was when it began. This man, Robert Moton, retired in 1935. So interesting timing there. And then a man named Dr. Eugene Dibble, who was the, of course, African-American head of the hospital there at the Tuskegee Institute. He signed off on this experiment too, and then he was promoted to a position at the Veterans Affairs VA hospital anyway in 1936. And I believe he was the first African-American colonel in the United States Armed Forces. So quid pro quo, ladies and gentlemen. And not only that, so they had the heads of the school said this is okay to do to their students, or to use their grounds for, and they were compensated accordingly. But not only that, but the participants were recruited through advertisements at local black churches. So the Tuskegee Institute, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, absolutely a sickening episode in the history of mankind, but made all the more terrible by the fact that it was people in their own community selling each other out. And that is just the truth, okay? In other examples, you're more likely to be assaulted or killed by someone you know than by a stranger. You're more likely to get in a car accident within a mile of your home than you are. Else the closer you are to your house, the more likely you are to get in an accident. All right. So there's just so many examples of this truth going on, and when we look at it as this group versus this group, it is a cartoon, and all it is a divide and conquer strategy. So you might believe in it. It might make you feel good to say it's one group is evil and one group is good, and of course I'm part of the good group. But it doesn't give you any ability to understand reality and to evaluate reality, right? So if in this case you want the lower ninth ward to be a better place, and you believe that a certain group of people is responsible for it being a bad place, it's not acting on that assumption is not going to make the lower ninth ward a good place. That's the problem with this mindset. Okay, it's not helping, right? It's virtue signaling, but virtue signaling is not helping. It's helping you. It's getting you social credit, but it's not helping the community, and that is what is so awful. So here I'm going to talk about race, which I've tried to avoid the whole video. And so I'm acknowledging, with especially things like the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, yes, black people have been targeted, right? And a great example that I think a person on Facebook just hipped me up to recently is in the 60s and 70s, and even before that, with white people, the CIA was giving them LSD and marijuana. With black people, they were giving them crack cocaine and now fentanyl, right? So those are two really different sets of experiences that they're using to, in either case, poison the community. But yeah, if you're like anyway, an important point to make there though is fentanyl is coming from China. So just for the record, like if you're like me, a conspiracy theorist, don't fall into the trap of saying it's all the government, right? Because some of it is not our government. Just like we are in Nicaragua doing terrible things, and Ukraine doing terrible things, and Syria and Libya and Afghanistan doing terrible things, other countries are here doing terrible things. And it's not just like China, right? Look at the Five Eyes agreement, right? Friggin' the New Zealand, just because it's a silly country, the New Zealand intelligence agency is spying on American citizens, right? And a lot of that data goes to our government, but a lot of that data goes like who knows where, maybe to China. But if you're a white supremacist, okay, here goes. If you are a white supremacist, you still need to care about black people, right? If only out of a spirit of enlightened self-interest. It goes like this, okay? Imagine I'm a small country. My neighbor is a small country. On the other side of him, there's a large country. If the large country invades the small country, I need to go and help defend the small country. Because if I don't, what's going to happen next is the large country is going to come and invade me, okay? So we need to help our neighbors out of a spirit of enlightened self-interest. It doesn't have anything to do with, well, of course it does, but it doesn't have anything to do with like highfalutin ideas or theology, Christianity, love. Even Stefan Molyneux can understand this concept, right? They don't use the same tactics. Okay, they're coming for you next. White supremacists, they're coming for you next. That's what I have to say to you, okay? Preppers, it's not going to work. You can't prep. You need to actively confront the evil that is going on in the world. Now, they're not going to use the same tactics on white people that they're using on black people. And just a basic understanding of this is like if there's two married couples, right? And one of them, and I want to destroy both of their marriages by spreading rumors, making them hate each other. I'm going to have to use different tactics for both of these couples, right? Like the one couple, I can tell the wife that the man is cheating on her, and she will hear that and she will sue for divorce, okay? But the other couple, if I say that to the wife, perhaps she will not believe me, right? She'll say, I don't believe you. My husband would never cheat on me, so I'm going to have to find something else. He doesn't like the way you fold the laundry or whatever, you know what I mean? Different groups have different weaknesses, and you got to know them. You got to really get in there. You got to have infiltrators. Again, it's a complicated business, and there's no one size fits all strategy for. There's general things, right? But there's no one size fits all strategy for how to destroy a community. Every battlefield is different, right? Or no plan survives contact with the enemy, I think is the quote. But there are certain like general strategies that you can use, like they're destroying the nuclear family. That's the same with black people and white people. Abortion is the same, right? And the food, right? And the various lifestyle diseases that are so rampant amongst African Americans are becoming also terrible amongst white people. And then on the other hand, to black people, right? This is ridiculous that I have to say this, and I apologize. Forgive me for having to say this, but I do not think that black people that you are genetically inferior. I don't think that we can look at the world and use that as an explanation for what we're seeing. The fact is, though, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to hear me say that, right? To a certain group of people, black or white, who believe a certain way, it doesn't matter if I say that I don't think black people are worse than white people, right? I'll always be a racist because I'm white. That is what makes me a racist. Not my views, not the way that I treat people, right? Not even like the content of my heart, right? So the only way that to black people, this is what I'm saying, the only way that this message that I'm communicating right now is going to get across to a certain section of the populace, if you want this to get across to them, is to go into the comment section and comment, I'm a black person and I approve this message. It's ridiculous. It sounds silly. It is silly, but that's what's going to work. Okay, I'm telling you. And listen, if you're a black person and you hate white people, you should still do that because they're coming for you next. Okay, the way that they are. I mean, and it's not as immediately destructive for white people, of course. Okay, but the cancel culture. You're not going to be allowed to speak your mind in a couple years if you don't speak your mind now. All right. And what I'm saying, this really illustrates one of the chief hypocrisies of the left, which concerns identity politics. All right. And, on the left, they say that you should be able to self-identify as whatever you want, right? Speak your truth, right? Unless you're white, and then you're racist. So, look at this. You can be, according to the left, you can be a man one day and a woman the next. And then you can go back to being a man the next day. Because you say you are. But if you're white, you will always be racist. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, you will always be racist. And the best thing you can be as a white liberal is an ally, right? That's all. That's what they say. If I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But I believe that is the current, social theory. So, real talk now. If I see someone who has black skin, I will never assume that a black person is insane. I will not. If I see a liberal, I will assume that they are insane. Out of touch, delusional, probably paranoid, incapable of reason. Maybe in 2019, they would have had an excuse, right? Indoctrination, bad schooling. But look, after 2020, if you still think that the mainstream narrative is on the level You are freaking nuts. That's it. Ignorance is not an excuse. We all have the same the same internet. You need to wake up. You are the reason we can't have nice things. And I mean, you can't choose your skin color, right? Okay? You can't blame a person for being born a certain color, but you can blame a person, you can hold a person accountable for believing a bonkers ideology, and we must. And if your friends are bonkers, it's not loving to let people keep, as the trumpet player next to me said, trip over their own dicks. Call them on their stuff, okay? So, but in conclusion, listen, I said I think liberals are insane. So you got to understand here, I'm not talking to liberals. I'm not trying to convince liberals of anything because they're insane. And if I were to say that they're insane and then try and have a conversation with them, I would be insane too, because you can't. That's the definition of the word insane. Doesn't make sense, okay? So look, this is the thing. I'm not here to convince you of what I'm saying. I'm just here to relate truth, describe reality as I see it, okay? And I'm going to bring it back to Christianity for my last point here, all right? This is the Christian worldview, okay? We are not here to convert people, okay? Everything that is done through the Holy Spirit. We are not here to convert you to make more Christians in the world. We are not here to lead by example. I am only here to speak the truth. Because to say nothing would be a lie by omission. And that would be a violation of the 9th commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, I guess, sorry, King James Version. So that's what I'm doing, right? If you think that you can disagree with me and respond, right? If you think that I'm being offensive and you can respond with an argument, I'm not here for that, because what I have as testament is reality, all right? And if you look at it and you see something different, you're nuts, right? So if you're a liberal after 2020, you're nuts. If you're a liberal after having lived in the lower 9th ward for 4 years or more, you're nuts, and you are beyond reason. Because these people have been in power, these people have had their chance, and you can see the effects of their actions on the community, and they are not worth celebrating, okay? They are destructive. So I'm going to close on that, and I'm going to thank everyone for watching, and please share this, even though it is what it is. Comment down below and subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot. This has been Evan Benton of Dogg for Mayor.